traditionally got it in our head that a religion has to be made up of supernatural stories. I don't think that has to be the case. I really don't think religion is fundamentally about beliefs. It's about psychological needs, and the beliefs sort of are just there to deliver them. Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to the Mindform podcast again. My name is Frank Lawton. I'm a father, husband, and contemplator with a passion for ways of operating which better empower us to live wholeheartedly. The Mindform podcast is an extension of the Mindform platform and is similarly a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together. In each weekly episode, I'll spark a conversation to mine for gems of wisdom and collaborate on the game of architecting our minds. Most of our guests are members of the Mindform platform, and we're all just big nerds for psychology, philosophy, and self-improvement. I'm really excited about this week's guest. It's Ryan A. Bush, the founder of Mindform itself, coiner of the terms psychotecture and psychotechnology, which we use here, author of 3 books, including his latest, Become Who You Are. Ryan is engineering a gamified psychological growth app in collaboration with a collection of geniuses at the moment, and that's really exciting. What I like about Ryan is his humility, his deep wells of information, and his highly systematized way of thinking through ideas. Probably what I like most about Ryan, though, is his genuine desire to serve and uplift others, which, as far as I can tell, is his primary motivation for most of all of these exciting things he's doing. I'm excited to get to know a little bit more about the mindscape within and behind all of these exciting ideas and projects. What psychotechnologies can I illuminate? Am I in a position to challenge any of these ideas that he comes out with? Prepare to be interrogated, Ryan. But before we go deep, just how are you? What have been I love asking this question, what have been your primary 3 emotions this week?
Ooh, well, Frank, I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, mate.
I'm doing pretty well. My emotions this week are mostly centered around both overwhelm and also relief and excitement about what's to come. Got a lot of projects going at the moment, but I'm gradually sort of getting to where I can see the light at the end of them, and really excited about what they're going to bring about. So that's what's going on this week. How about you?
The, that part of the movie right before the resolution where maybe things are a bit prettier on the other side.
Yes.
That's what
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see how the movie goes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll jump into one of these questions that I've sent you. We're talking about the things that you're really excited about, the work that you're doing. My question is, what is your, that's a big question. It might be a bit hard for you to answer straight off, but what is your grand, as if anything was possible, world vision? You're talking about all of these Mindform centers. You want an app, you want people to have these psychotechnologies, but paint a picture for me of your utopia that if everything went absolutely well and you had all the right people on your side, you could build.
Yeah, the year is 2048. No,
okay, here we go.
No, I'll go through a few of these core things. A big part of what has been fueling me on this sort of thing I've been calling psychotecture is this idea that mental health is very different from the world we see in physical health. So, in physical health, you've got the medical sort of physical therapy side, but you've also got this passionate, excited community. You've got gyms that you go to regularly to just get stronger. You don't have to have anything wrong with you. It's something to be proud of that you're working on your mental health, on your physical health, that is. And so I sort of see a world where mental health becomes more like that. Right now, mental health is it's starting to sort of become destigmatized, but overall, it's still sort of something to be ashamed of if you're working on your mental health. That means there's something wrong with you, you're broken. And that's really kind of how our institutions are structured right now. And so I see this world where yes, we have therapy for people who are really struggling. Yes, we have these systems for people at the bottom end of the mental health continuum, but we also have this exciting positive space that's just dedicated to getting better and getting stronger, and happier, healthier. And so I see this playing out in a few different ways. One is just changing our beliefs around mental health and psychology and philosophy. I try to do this through my books, but I would like to get deeper in some of our institutions. I would like to see kids being taught a lot of these principles before they're being taught math and social studies or whatever. I also want to create an app. We've already got Mindform, which is a huge step towards this kind of app. I really don't know of anything else like the Mindform that we have now, but I'm constantly trying to build it into more. And I want to create a more personalized, sort of intelligent, streamlined experience that will gradually and systematically just help people develop healthier, happier brains. And so I'm working on that app. And then, you mentioned the Mindform centers. I want there to be a place you can go, and a community with people you get to know, that's sort of like a gym, but for your mind. I want you to have a local Mindform center that you can go to, and just actively grow collectively with other people, actively learn the principles of psychotecture, and the philosophy and psychology that's informed it, and also have a community, have people that you're really close with who are like-minded and driven toward a similar purpose. Right now, I think our world is just really missing a lot of that community. And so this sort of that sort of captures the main points of my grand vision. Ultimately I could get even more grandiose with it if we wanted to, but that's almost I almost keep some of those ambitions to myself so as not to sound crazy earlier on. But,
all right, I'll wait. I'll ask you again in 30 minutes for those. But I really, what I liked about the way you answered that, because we have heard a bit on the platform, and I've seen you talk about this stuff on other podcasts and that. About this sort of metaphor of we have, well, not just gyms, right? We have schools, we have churches, we have gyms, we have all of these things which are spaces where people go to learn, to grow in whatever way. And let's bring the best of that. You've used that sort of phrasing, and a space that's dedicated to sort of growing your character. But just as you were describing, I was really visualizing that, and it actually paints it's a picture that you can see, like, of, especially in the gym culture, like, hey man, I'm heading off to the Mindform gym, or whatever you want, whatever it's going to be called. Do you want to go do a workout with me? And you're going there and you're doing Dialogos conversation circles, or you're testing your resilience or your persistence on some kind of meditative or task, or a sauna, or who knows, right? But like, I can see that sort of playful thing, that, hey, like, how's your workout going? How are your gains going? That really sick. Because
yes,
what's cool about the workout culture, it's like a game, right? Like, people just it's so fun. You're building something in yourself, and there's a playfulness to that. That was my experience when I was really into the fitness culture, and to bring that playfulness instead of that solemnness and maybe shame that comes along with that's just, it's an easy image. So well said.
It's not hard to visualize. A lot of futuristic visions are, but this, it's not that the technology isn't there or that the interest wouldn't be there or anything. It's really just that no one's kind of done it yet, or
just
at least not in this way.
Yeah.
It's not there. And so, the gamified nature of it, the fact that it should be playful and fun and positive, it's definitely a departure from how mental health gets treated now, which even destigmatizing it, these conversations typically center around just being more open about our struggles, just talking about your depression more. It's like, that's better. That's better than being secretive about it, but we're not going far enough. We need to fundamentally reframe it. So you definitely get it.
Yeah. It's I mean, you wonder what are the barriers, or what are the reasons that this doesn't exist in quite the way you paint it, and I see it is different, right, in a way, to physical fitness, to enhancing your body, in that we do have these really embedded, even in our language, structures of shame, or these, all of these sort of associations that we have about our own character. Wherein I think, well, I mean, it's what you already mentioned, but there's even just the idea of thinking about yourself and improving yourself. A lot of people can't even step into that space because it's because of the way we grow up and the way people talk, and whatever it is, you just can't bear the shame that carries with it. Do you see building this as, I can imagine it having the effect, when it's the sort of the space that's already structured to gamify, and it has this lighthearted attitude, and people can go into community and it's all there for people. Like, I can imagine that helping people move past the shame. But I do think, like, how deeply embedded these worldviews people have, like these fixed mindset as opposed to growth mindset, and looking at yourself and other people as what you are instead of what's going on within you and what you desire, and not having that separation of your attributes and yourself, like all of these things that are like deep in the collective consciousness. I can see those as being real barriers. Do you think about those, and then how do you think about dealing with that?
Yeah, it's crazy how hard it is to overcome the kind of cultural baggage and just dogmas that build up over time. Like, I just got an email today from someone who was saying, like, yeah, I read your book. I agree with a lot of it, but one thing that I think is wrong is, you talk about changing your emotions and all this, and I just have learned, like, you can't suppress your emotions. You cannot suppress them. It's totally wrong to suppress them. And it's like, well, who said anything about suppressing them? Like, why does our culture have it in its head that there are only two ways to approach your emotions? You can either express them and just feel them exactly as they are without changing them at all, or suppress them and bottle them up until you explode. Like, the part of the reason I'm putting out like hundreds of psychotechnologies and putting out this book that's coming out soon, The Philosopher's Field Guide, is to show, like, no, there are hundreds of different ways of dealing with your emotions. Yeah, some of them are unhealthy. Suppression is pretty much universally found to backfire and be unhealthy. But cognitive reappraisal has pretty much been universally found to be really healthy. It has, as far as I've read in hundreds of papers, it only has positive effects for people who practice it heavily, which, for context, that's basically just when you change your interpretation or your framing of a situation so that it leads to a better emotional trajectory. And so, yeah, overcoming these cultural sort of ideas that just get built up in folk psychology to the point where people can't even really challenge or question them, that's definitely a major hurdle. And I guess some of the ways I want to address it is, one, right now we're only reaching a small percent of the population who actually is on this wavelength, who actually gets this and thinks this way. And I think it makes sense to gradually grow and sort of snowball that group until there's more awareness and interest in this kind of thing. But two, yeah, I think, like, the app, for example, making it so it's rewarding to do these things, and almost showing rather than telling in terms of the right way to think about your mind, making it really fun. So you almost don't even notice you're working on your mental health until you realize, oh, wait, I'm actually a lot happier now than I was a year ago. Like, just making it seem like a fun game on your phone or something, or a cool place you go and visit every week. Like, that, I think, is really key to changing a lot of those mindsets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing more powerful for gaining a new perspective on reality than just having an entirely new experience. If you can craft a space for people where you enter that space, and in that context, crafting your own mind is playful, it is rewarding. In that context, you can just see the results. I think that's going to do a lot more than talking to people about how is the self structured, or shame, it's not a very useful emotion, or whatever message you're trying to get across. Going through that gamified structure is far more effective. And yeah, I find that for myself as well. Like, I've read a lot of books. I mean, philosophically, I couldn't agree more with well, just like, for example, cognitive reappraisal, right? Like that's just a given for me at this point with the amount of education I've given myself on it. And yet still, it's not my automatic habit. And just yesterday, because I've just been going on this habit for a couple months now of just writing out my emotions in the evening, and then sometimes I might elaborate on some of them, or I might do a bit of that like focusing exercise that Julian ran a month on Mindform. Just for a bit of context, that's like you you sit there, you have an emotion or whatever that's coming up, and you just try to like pay attention over time and watch how that emotion shifts, and then see what phrases and words come up with it. It's just this investigating of the emotion. So I'll do a bit of those practices in the evening. And one of the things that I find has really just acute impacts is that reappraisal thing. So like, for example, I have a few friends, including you actually, who just a lot of big moves, right? A lot of really big moves in terms of interest in pretty much the same things that I'm interested in. I had a mate come around just the other day, and I was talking to me about his entrepreneurship and stuff. And for whatever reason, ADHD, time management stuff, I'm not quite at that launch pad with some of my particular ambitions that I have. And that was creating like certain negative emotions for me, like feeling a bit frustrated with myself or something like that. And I was writing that out in my journal, and you do that reappraisal, and it just okay. I don't know. I was just checking on the feeling. I was like, okay, well, that is definitely one sort of thing I could say to myself in response to seeing people who I know succeed. But there's also like a million other truths that can be deduced from that. That's the manifestation of a very complex picture. Which part of that picture am I going to focus on? And so just writing out that reappraisal for myself. And now every time I think about those thoughts come up, or those memories come up of these people, the emotion is just completely different. And it's not a suppression, it's a transfiguration. And something that was, I posted that you liked my note. I posted this on my Substack, like as an example of that. But like, just something that was a drain for me, was friction for me, is just transformed into fuel. And to be able to do that over and over and over again is, you can see the transformational power. I mean, I know you yourself have said that thought triggers are kind of they're like really the crux of it for you. They are the one tool that can, in a way, just absolutely rebuild your psychology. And you'd still stand by that, eh?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are a lot of different angles that I view that through, like the psychological algorithms, thought triggers, psychotechnologies. These are all closely related and essentially saying the same thing, which is that we don't just have our habits out in the world, the obvious things like going to the gym and brushing your teeth. We have a massive network of internal habits in terms of what our mind does in response to certain events and thoughts and emotions. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you identify an area where you can build a better mental habit and come up with a solution, you're most of the way there. Then you just have to get a little bit more sort of, you have to make it more of a habit to default to the new thought. But absolutely, I mean, that's the thing. Once you identified it, once you saw that your brain was doing that, you were able to substitute a much healthier thought. I mean, I was, just as you were saying it, I was thinking about how but like 5 years ago, I was working this part-time design job with this vague idea of a book I wanted to write. I wasn't making a lot of really big moves, and it's really just, an initial leap that sort of led to what I couldn't have even envisioned 5 years ago, and all this stuff. I mean, it's really not until you build that momentum and start growing it that you get to that space. So yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to reframe that kind of thing. And it's funny too how, like, even just working on these psychotechnologies and actually formalizing a list of mental tools, it's actually helped me. Like, I've created psychotechnologies that once I named them, I was actually able to like almost eliminate them from my emotional vocabulary, eliminate the negative sort of emotion, the struggle that I was habitually feeling, because, oh, now I actually have a name. I have something that I can just install in my brain when I experience this type of thought. So I think it's going to be pretty huge in terms of just breaking a lot of those bad mental habits that most of us have.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you're speaking to the power of teaching, right, as a form of learning. And I'm finding that as well. Like, again, with just putting out ideas and writing online and trying to make a habit of doing that, like it just every day spending time trying to articulate these in a way that it's going to be helpful to someone else. I realize those ideas are then floating around in my head for the rest of the day, and thus steering my action and thus steering my emotions in a really positive direction throughout. It's super transformational, and I think it speaks to something that's come up, I think, on a few of these episodes of the podcast, which is articulating, like bringing words to things that are going on inside you, just having the capacity to map it and understand the different components and how they interact. Even just having a map, even if it's not perfect, that's like a huge step in having power over it. It's like that story of the dragon in the house. Mum, there's a dragon in the house. It's this big, and oh, there's no such thing as dragons. And every time she says that, it gets a little bit bigger until its head sticking out the door and its tail sticking out the window. And Mum, there's a dragon in the house. Oh, I see it. And then just that the power that it's a cool metaphor for the power that naming has, because it shrinks after she says that. And it reminds me of, like, well, you were talking about wanting to teach this stuff in schools before math, before and I think that's for the same reason, right? Like, most people, we have in our collective language and in our just mutual understanding that sort of baseline level of education that the vast majority of the population has access to. We have all of this language and all of these maps for talking about the employment space, not so much the business space, but like the employment space and and mathematics and reading and writing and all of that. But we just don't have that same shared language structure for the mind. And it's not so much like, I've always thought about, when I've thought about educating young people, like practicing meditation, really having to develop skills. But maybe that's not well, maybe you can get a lot without having to go that far. Really just giving kids language so that everyone who's 18 years old, 25 years old, every young adult actually has what is very rare now, which is just the language to understand what's going on inside them. They have a map of their internal reality, which is invisible. It's invisible to most people. And then things like, coming up with a new appraisal isn't this unintuitive battle. People, it's such a simple idea. It's such a simple idea to, you're upset by something, and then you go, okay, well, what was the thought interpretation of that thing that made me feel that emotion? Okay, what's another way I could interpret that? Like, that's an extremely simple idea. It makes perfect sense, but it's such an unintuitive thing for someone to learn, and it can take months, if not years, of engaging with these ideas as an adult to really begin to actually do that, and do that consistently. But you're encouraging it as a young person. You don't have this, it's not an uphill battle, right? Because it just becomes part of your map of reality.
Yes, I think creating a vocabulary, like just a literal verbal vocabulary, is a huge step. And structuring it in the right way. I also think a visual vocabulary is really important. And that's why, in my first book, I put 100 different illustrations, and I'm, creating emblems for each of these psychotechnologies. I think you really want to reinforce these ideas both with words and imagery. Because in many cases, I think we're spatial thinkers fundamentally, and I think we learn things and internalize them best when we have a visual metaphor or representation for them. I actually remember reading this book, Donut Economics, a while back, that argued, like, these frameworks that basically perpetuate our current economic system, it's basically captured in a bunch of diagrams that are shown to undergrad economics students. They've been in textbooks for 50 years. If we really want to change these systems, we need to change the way we, like, literally visually represent them. And that's part of that, like the donut that she put forward, is like, we need new diagrams. We need a new way to visualize this in order to change the way we think about it.
Was one of the diagrams donut-esque? Is that the...
Yeah, I mean, that's the core diagram, is a donut. Yeah, it's on the cover, I even think. So, it's...
that sounds like a good book.
It is a great book. I recommend it.
Cool.
Anything that's, like, actually proposing new solutions or ways to think about problems in society instead of just pointing out the problem, which of course is the first step, but it's not enough, right? I'm very interested in even just hypothetical solutions that may have their own flaws as well.
But it's a big step. I've been realizing that more than ever. Like, so often it's not the work that I'm doing. I mean, the work that I'm doing in my life, the work in my personal development, the work, whatever, it matters. But it seems like the primary cause of the direction that my life goes in, and if I experience real growth, real well-being, it comes down to what I'm paying attention to. Like, there's something that's going on. Am I aware of it or not? Because like human beings, we're problem-solving creatures, right? Like, as soon as we're aware of something, as soon as we have the language to understand something, we're dealing with it, we're interacting with it, we're coming up with solutions, and you can improve that process. But just to be doing that process is very doing that, like solving problems versus not solving them, is a much bigger difference than solving them sort of badly versus solving them really well. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
And you talk about just going back to what you were saying about visual representations. I know something that you're interested in, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as well, is how do you take an understanding of the environment which we're adapted to, which not only are we genetically and probably still epigenetically adapted to, these tribal communities, a non-digital environment, being out in nature, small groups, all of this stuff, like, but we're also there'll be cultural and language heritage that we're still carrying, right? Everything, our so much of what is true about us is built out of this millennia living in this context that is very different to our context today. And one of the things as a parent that I think about when it comes to that is learning. Like, how does learning work? How does relaying ideas work? And I think the modern way of relaying ideas almost entirely through language is so poor. It's so poor and so different to what we're adapted to. Like, the way I try to teach Finn is he's just on my hip, Finn being my son, or on my shoulders, or walking next to me while I'm out in the world chatting to people, doing mahi, like doing work. Sorry, Māori New Zealand word there. Like, getting at it, and he's like kind of copying me, and I might give him a kind of a safeified opportunity to engage as I'm engaging, and let him experiment and fail. Like, so, the learning by doing and the learning by seeing, there's not always a lot of talking going on when I'm doing that. I might name, or what he's engaging with. I might say words to help steer him, but the words are only, the words are the icing on the cake. The cake of learning, the cake of learning is it's seeing, and it's doing, and it's participating. That's, to me, is like, that's the way I would put it. It's participating in that trial and error within a space where the ideas are already being demonstrated visually to you, and that is just so different. That's so different to, I mean, that's incorporated to some degree in schooling, and definitely in early childhood education that's incorporated, but it's different to our habits around how we portray ideas. And we put a lot of effort. We put a lot of effort as a society communicating verbally, getting ideas across, just in words. And maybe it's not the most efficient way.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on the education system. I mean, memorization of just purely, yeah, you can if you want, but memorization of purely verbal concepts, it's the lowest form of learning. I mean, applying things through your actions is the best way to do it. And that's why my education, once I got deep into my design degree, was really great, because it's all just doing projects and learning through doing. But yeah, I mean, high school, I literally had to keep myself entertained to get through a lot of what you're supposed to memorize through all that. And that's definitely going into how I teach on Mindform, and how I want to build this app when I'll have more freedom on how to do it. But
how do you
education,
how do you like incorporate doing? Because my understanding, I mean, you can fill this out for me, but my understanding of sort of your journey into the beginning of building Mindform and designing the mind, and all of these is that you were working, these were things you're interested in on the side, and then you sort of made a commitment. Okay, I'm gonna give a lot more time to. I'm gonna write this book, and I'm gonna put it out there, and I'm gonna build Mindform. I'm just gonna focus in, and I guess there's a lot of doing in that, but it does seem like a very wordy, linguistic sort of world to step into. I mean, what were you hiding in your basement, just typing away and reading lots of books? And yeah, how would you understand that in this landscape of doing versus talking for learning? And how has your learning evolved in that way?
Yeah. So I guess one way to look at that is like if you're trying to learn a foreign language, the pretty much the worst way to learn it would be just to have someone talk you through how you speak it without doing any speaking yourself or writing, or just reading a book on how to learn it. The best way to do it, if you have the kind of commitment and the means, is to throw the person into that situation and immerse them so that they're speaking the language actively. And probably the second best way to do it is through something like Duolingo, where rather than just a one-way sort of information transfer, you're really teaching yourself. You really have to construct the sentences. There actually aren't even any lessons in that app. They don't teach you this is what this word means. They just say, okay, here's the sentence, complete it, and you sort of use deduction before you even know what the words mean to go ahead and figure out how to construct the sentence. So it's purely applied, and I think it's much more efficient that way. And so that's a big part of how I want to teach psychotecture. Like I want people to be plugging in a situation that happened to them, a mood that triggered, or a thought, and then actually learning in that logging and journaling process what to do next when that kind of thing happens in your brain. So you're actually sort of in real time redirecting your mental trajectory rather than just learning in theory how to do it and likely never getting to the point where you actually build the habit of doing it yourself. I've been thinking a lot about different forms of learning, and I actually want to create a drawing, like an illustration, like we're talking about, based on this. But it's basically a quadrant map with two different things, like comprehensive. Yes, go ahead and draw it.
Okay, go.
Yeah, so it's a quadrant map with two axes. One we can call comprehensiveness, and the other we can call fun. And really, fun, it's really shorthand for like the ratio of work to reward that you get out of it, that sort of removes friction in doing it. And so you can take something like a textbook, which is pretty much the most extreme in comprehensiveness, but the lowest in reward, or the lowest in fun. Then you can take something like a tweet or a TikTok, which is going to be the lowest in comprehensiveness, but the highest in fun. It provides, immediate rewards, the whole dopamine thing. But you're not really going to build a comprehensive understanding of anything from reading tweets. Sorry. And then you got things that get a little closer, like podcasts here. Like it definitely gets more in depth. You can learn more from a podcast. But it's still it's sort of in the middle on both. I'd
say, but slightly below the middle. Very
agreed.
Far on the fun end. Maybe less fun than a tweet, though. People tend to spend more time tweeting than podcasting.
And then there are things like actual social structures. Like if you go to school to study something, you're still reading the books. It's still sort of the same comprehensiveness from a textbook, but you get the added fun, or you could say like decreased friction, that's provided by having social accountability, by having peers and authority figures who are sort of fueling you to actually go through reading all those books. And I would say
the comprehensiveness is enhanced by the fact that you can have back and forth dialogues with people about the content, So
yeah, absolutely. But then to me, the best combination, well, you can add like documentaries on there. You can have like YouTube videos that really give you pretty decent coverage. You can have courses. But to me, software is kind of where the magic could be. I don't see a lot of comprehensiveness in terms of digital learning. Most of the learning apps that I have used, with the exception of like language learning apps and stuff, they don't go that deep. They're still kind of like surface level fun rewards. But I absolutely think you could create software, and I plan to, that provides really comprehensive learning, like mini books worth of information packed into it, but does it in a way that's really fun, really rewarding, low cognitive effort, and just really interactive, just really personalized and fun. And so to me, in some ways, the reason why I'm still writing books is because I still need the funding to build an app. But I really think an app is better than a book in every level, because it can be equally comprehensive, but far more fun and rewarding.
Yeah, I agree. Here's the picture for everyone. It's not beautifully drawn, I must say. And those who are just listening won't be able to see it, but there it is.
Yep.
I think education and creating systems, especially for young people, is a big part of making that happen. But what do you understand? Because I have my own ideas about this as well. I'm interested to see some similarity. What do you understand to be the core building blocks of movements that are at a religious scale, as in rewritings of the collective consciousness, movements that last, movements that are deep, movements that spread wide?
Yeah, well, and we should probably even back up and sort of I guess give some context on my interest in this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
For one, I grew up in the Christian religion, and so I recall a lot about that sort of experience. I ended up leaving it when I was still a teenager, but not without recognizing the value that's brought by it, and something that's, I think, is sort of missing from modern culture. And we were talking about grandiose visions earlier and not getting into them. Well, part of that is wanting to sort of design a movement, a popular practical philosophy, or you might even say a religion, and not only on the philosophical side, but on the societal need in terms of sort of fueling collective change. I think we need something on the scale of a religion to really change these deeply entrenched patterns in our culture. And so that's, I guess, provides why we would want to build a religion or a movement like this. In terms of the core building blocks, it's really interesting. It's something I've been analyzing for a long time, because I think religion is in many ways a psychotechnology stack, or you could also say a sociotechnology stack. And what that means is that the ideology itself, the belief system, provides a lot of psychological needs. I think the reason why movements stick, and this applies to political movements, it applies to political candidates who have really passionate followings, and it applies to the religions that have been around for millennia. They serve a lot of psychological needs for a person who holds them, so they're very appealing to a person. A big part of that is identity. It gives you a role to play. Right. It gives you a sense that you are special, and you have sort of a unique insight, or a unique way of playing into this great sort of story that's unfolding. It gives you an object of the game. And I often talk about religions as games, because you sort of need a North Star. And when you have a religion, even though a lot of religions aren't fully thought out in terms of their like belief system, if you can suspend your disbelief enough just to get behind it, it's really nice to actually have an idea of like which way is up, what's the goal of all this. And you can note the importance of this by looking at an actual really fun game, like a video game that is just really enjoyable to play, versus something like Second Life, which, if you are familiar, it's more of a simulation. It's not really a game, because there's no goal, there's no reward.
Sounds boring as.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's still around and it still has this weird sort of cult following. But yeah, I mean, you can do anything you want, but there's no system set up to tell you what you should do. And in many ways, that's what life is like without a religion. You can do anything you want, but you know, it's all the same essentially.
Yeah, I love the way with all of these visions you paint and points you're trying to make. You can point to something really grounded like gym culture or video games, these different video games to help me and the listener to envision. Oh, this is
Yeah.
what the actual difference is. It's a really helpful way to explain. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I,
love using metaphor both to learn and teach.
yeah, and that again, that's the whole articulating to understand thing, right? Like if you can give someone a reference that they have a map for that, then you can just shift that map over, and that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, this whole idea of a North Star, I think one thing that goes on in our culture now that a lot of people, well, I mean, there's a lot of unspoken North Stars like consumption or professional achievement or wealth accumulation, or clout that
Mm-hmm.
that sort of fill that void, and beyond that, people are sort of left to craft their own personal North Star, which is, that's what you probably can't. The video is probably not high quality enough, but that's something I try to do. Like, okay, well, what really, really, really speaks to my soul? What's a point that I can articulate for why I'm here, based on what's important to me, whatever. So that I know how to act. And it's just a really exhausting. It's just exhausting to do that and to maintain that, and we rub up against each other, and having something that is collectively spoken, collectively agreed upon. It feels more secure. It feels like something strong enough to stand on. Like my sister said something really insightful the other day. We were talking about sort of receiving praise and how impactful it can be to receive praise. The Marissa Peer, who's this sort of famous hypnotherapist, she hypnotherapizes like lots of celebrities and stuff. She says, the words you hear matter, but the most important words you'll ever hear are the ones you say to yourself. And I think, oh, that's true, but the difference from hearing ideas from other people, whether it's whatever kind of idea that is, whether it's where you should be going or whether it's praise or whatever, is that when it's coming from yourself, you can always just think, oh yeah, but maybe I'm crazy. Like maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. But if multiple people are saying it, multiple people are seeing it, you can just it makes it so much easier to just believe it and just ride that wave. And so I agree. I agree that there's an importance to having an outcome. And I've spent a bit of time trying to understand why really good video games are really good. Like what are the attributes they have, and are they attributes that you can't find in the real world? And I think one of the things I heard it described, video games described as clarity porn, by someone. Yeah, someone wrote an article and mentioned that way
I
of
think I
understanding
saw the
video
same
games.
thing on Substack.
yeah, it was on Substack. Yeah. Genius. I think that's a really, really good way to articulate it. Like you just get that need for, I know what's going on, I know what I should be doing, and I can just enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
But maybe everyone used to feel that way.
Well, and there's a book called Reality is Broken that talks about a lot of those elements that video games have that life doesn't have. And to be clear, there's a big problem with using actual video games as that thing for your life, because it doesn't provide those rewards in a deep sense.
No, very shallow.
And I think the same goes for like what you said about consumerism and getting rich and stuff. Really, I think a big part of this is scale. If the purpose that is your North Star feels really small, it's going to be really weakly motivating and not that rewarding to work toward. If it feels huge, like on a cosmic scale, it's going to be massively motivating, both on an individual and a collective scale. I mean, people, cultures move mountains when they have a true North Star and everyone's on board with it. And so I think the problem with a lot of our modern substitutes for these ancient religions is they aren't that big in scale. They are either just the scale of your own personal life or your family. maybe your culture or, even humanity, that's about as big as we can get. But it's hard to reach that cosmic scale that we sort of had when we could when we could believe that all of these stories were true, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yeah, I mean that's because I go to church on the weekends, and I wouldn't identify myself as a Christian, but I think it's partly what you speak to. I enjoy a space that's dedicated to this is the goal that we're all striving towards, and
Mm-hmm.
that captures and speaks in a really personal and relational way to these truths of the human experience, and tools and systems for how to tap into the fullness of life. So I enjoy going to church for that reason, and being in that community and talking about Jesus and all of that. And that's something that is strange to me about that space, that everyone seems to kind of agree that there's like a point, and they know what the point is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I'm not quite on the same page about as them, or at least I don't have the same point. And it's just a qualitatively just completely different mode of experiencing. One of the things that I find difficult about that is, and this speaks to why people have responded with such hostility to religion in the past, and why the culture shifted in the way it has, is how do you articulate, how do you get a collectively, socially, structurally reinforced this is the why for being alive, that doesn't prescribe these really enclosing boundaries upon people. Yeah, basically, So one thing that I find frustrating is people will have these philosophical conversations, but there's this hidden underlying agreement, it seems, that they already know what the right conclusion to come to at the end of that conversation is, the right sort of opinion or the right belief, because that's sort of socially and structurally prescribed to them what the right beliefs are. And so to me, it can have an impeding influence on the genuine, that openness to experience and the genuine search for truth. And yeah, so how do you reconcile that, right? Is that something you thought about, how you reconcile the structuring it in but not closing it in, I suppose?
It is something I thought about, and it's definitely a challenge. I think it's doable, but I first was gonna say, like, it's very understandable that you would want to go to church. Like, I've been tempted at a lot of points to join some kind of church, even though I don't subscribe to those beliefs, because it's the closest thing we have to this thing I'm talking about wanting to create in terms of the Mindform centers. Like, we really don't have a lot of alternatives, and I think the biggest reason why I haven't gone and done that is I just don't see there being that many like-minded people and in the current churches that exist. But I'll say, in terms of the belief system, I think you kind of have to look at it almost demographically or psychographically. Like, there are going to be some people who really just want to believe what you tell them, and it's probably genetic. There's probably no hope to get everyone to become a really open, non-dogmatic free thinker, right? And so you almost have to create something that works on multiple levels, because there are some people who are skeptics and who want to build their beliefs on their own and who won't accept dogma. So you almost have to create a multi-level movement where, you can just accept what you're being told, but you can also go deeper and understand the layers underneath it. In terms of the actual belief system, I think we've just kind of traditionally got it in our head that a religion has to be made up of, these kind of supernatural stories. I don't think that has to be the case. I think you could have an entirely naturalistic, scientifically based religion that still works psychologically as that kind of motivating movement. But it would clearly be different from any of these past religions that we've seen before. Ultimately, the belief system in a religion, to be a little bit crass, it's kind of like the plot in a pornographic film. Like, it's not really what you're there for. It just allows you to, it just sort of sets the stage. And so I I really don't think religion is fundamentally about beliefs. It's about psychological needs, and the beliefs sort of are just there to deliver them or set the stage
Oh
for them.
yeah, I mean absolutely. Although that's not to not just the beliefs but the stories, right? And that's not to discredit those are really, really, really powerful ways to convey ideas and to convey tools to people and to get people like that. They're, I mean, I'm really leaning into story is an incredibly powerful way to communicate. And when I think about religion, how do you create a movement? How do you communicate in a way that creates a movement? Jesus, the Buddha, both of those people talked in parables almost entirely, right? Like it's a great way to get a point across. I don't know if I agree. I think I want to challenge you on that. I mean, maybe it depends what you mean by supernatural, but something I keep coming back to, and it's just, it could just be the limits of my imagination. But when I try to paint a picture of, what kind of religions could there be, and how do people get really passionately invested in it? And when I have conversations with Christians, when I go deep, when I say, "Oh, what's the story?" When I do a bit of that, how minds change kind of work, some deep canvassing, and there's always the ineffable is always at the root of it, and they always lean back to that when they, that's the why that they jump onto these stories, that they jump onto these beliefs. These beliefs are a way to express and articulate something that they've felt, something that they've experienced that they can't quite articulate. And maybe there's a number of different ways that can be incorporated in a movement. Maybe it's just by having a highly secularized or materialist or whatever it is, scientific set of belief systems and even stories, just historically accurate stories about the human experience, but giving people some acid or mushrooms to sort of take together once in a while whilst talking about it, or doing these sort of other mind-altering, touching the ineffable sort of experiences that craft that, like dance and music and tribal ritual and that sort of thing. And even just a sense of community can do that, but I still think there has to be this at the core, at the center, at the base. I'm saying the same thing but in different ways, or constantly being pointed towards. There has to be that thing that we can't quite describe what it is, and I feel like that's also a protection against dogma and against limited worldviews. When there's that acknowledgement that there's something here that we don't understand, and we're pointing towards that. So, the things that we say they're not the truth. They're just the best. They're just our best attempt to capture it. Yeah, what would you say to that?
Yeah. So as far as the ineffable goes, I think I think a number of scientific thinkers have conveyed the sort of awe and wonder that can be found just in the scientific reality of the
That's
world. There's so much that we'll never be able to explain. The deeper we go down, black holes or quantum physics or whatever, the more we find just mystery. I will say that mystery sort of cuts both ways, because yes, it can reduce dogma and lead us to just embrace uncertainty and say, well, we can't understand it all. It can also lead to the sort of God works in mysterious ways. I'm using this mystery to defend whatever I'm already sure of, kind of thing. But I think really what it comes down to, I just know. Yeah. I think what it really comes down to, though, is creating a story that maps onto scientific reality. And yes, it still is a story. It has the narrative components that sort of click in our minds. If you just throw out a series of facts, no one's going to read that. No one's going to want to hear that.
I think you said having stories that map onto scientific reality. Would you change that? Would you re-say that as having stories which map onto phenomenal reality? Having stories which map on, I mean, you can understand it scientifically, of course, but it's not. So maybe it can be part of scientific reality, but it's not the reality of things. It's not Spinoza, it's not like the reality of the natural environment and the workings there, the reality of the body and you can understand that, and that can be a part of it. But the reality that when we're talking about changing the culture, we're talking about giving people the tools. It's a map and a language for phenomenal reality, as in for reality as it's experienced by the experiencer. It's that interface, right? That interface between mind and matter, or that, which is different, isn't it? Scientific reality.
Yeah, so I think it certainly includes what we would call phenomenal reality, which is just kind of the world of our experience. But we also want to explain things like, evolution and the genesis of the universe, which we could get into like idealism and say maybe that's all just products of our experience. But we really want this to extend to a cosmic scale. So when I talk about stories that map onto reality, I'm saying like we want to maybe anthropomorphize evolution, for example, and make it a story by creating these characters. And I've talked about I've written a couple of these like potential myths or stories that have characters, and instead of the devil or the snake or whatever in Christianity, I've talked about this concept of like Moloch, which is kind of a mythological character that goes back to Ginsberg, but it's hard to explain, but it's sort of some of the challenges of just collective coordination being at the root of the problems that humanity faces today. And so essentially crafting a story that while still satisfying narratively, especially for people who respond more to narratives, it ultimately lines up with what we know about both the past and what we decide needs to be done in the future, such that just following the story will produce the right sort of best outcome for humanity. And
sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, like, in terms of who could be qualified to craft this story and essentially know, the future and what's going to create the right outcome, I don't know. We may just have to collectively do the best we can with it. But that's sort of what I have in mind when I say this.
Yeah, something that seems really central to all religious narratives that I've heard of or engaged with is these personifications, right? These humanized characters, these describing forces, phenomena, patterns in reality in a social way, as individuals, as characters in a story who relate in a way that is so inherently comprehensible to us as relational beings. Conflict, care, learning, teaching, all of that. And so that seems really, really core. And another thing that seems, and I want to get into the nitty gritty. Let's make some of these stories. Like, another thing that seems really core is not just the deep and personal as well as the cosmic, but an inherent tying together of these things, right? Where, so in the case of Christianity, for example, like sort of the point of our existence is to worship God. That's one of the ways that it's understood, and it's similar in Islam as well. It's like God created the universe to sort of worship him, and so by doing that we are, or maybe to be in relationship with him, and so by doing that we are literally fulfilling the point of all of physical material reality. Or you get these sort of more new age, which honestly approximate what I believe quite well, understandings of consciousness or whatever, where it's like God is universal consciousness, and by unifying your consciousness with universal consciousness, then there becomes the sort of one ethereal, or whatever the word is, consciousness that pervades all of reality and unifies it, and then there's this completion. Or in Buddhism, the world, the whole universe is a sort of a mental construction created by the cycle of dharma, and if every single person awakens from that cycle, then life and death and reality basically cease to exist, and you become in this blissful nothingness state. So that all of them, they talk about the fundamental substrate of reality, the structure of reality, having this close tie to the deeply personal. My two questions to you on that would be: do you buy into that at all? Or is consciousness to you just like an accident of byproduct evolution or something like that? And do you think that that's necessary, that deep tying together of the personal and the ultimate, in religious narrative and religious worldview? And also, do you think that the personification of reality or forces in reality is necessary? Go on.
So a few things. First, as far as what's necessary, I like to think of it more as like layers that enhance it from a motivational standpoint. So like you could have it without the personification. Like you can, that's the only way you can really make sense of all the diverse things that we call religion now. Like Buddhism doesn't have a lot of components that you see in Christianity, but it works because it has enough of these layers to make it motivating. Stoicism is kind of a fewer layers than that, but it still works in some ways. It's sort of borderline not really considered a religion. But in terms of, I was going to say too, talking about how the personal connects to the, cosmic universal, you mentioned the point being to worship God or build a relationship with God. I think a huge one to note is to spread the word of God, because that's not only just the purpose that, gives people that psychotechnological need. It's also what makes the religion work on a societal level. It's what causes it to spread, is that it actively tells its followers to spread the word, and that is what perpetuates it. That's what's kept it alive in many ways for millennia. And so that probably has to be a component of any movement that wants to stick around for a long time. Is it has to really push spreading the word. In terms of the sort of cosmic reality. So this is one that, as of right now, my worldview and what I think makes the most sense is that consciousness and life and all these things that we feel are important and sacred to us really are more or less cosmic accidents, and they don't serve a grander purpose in the fundamental nature of reality and the universe. That being said, I've read a couple books that have made me sort of consider more that there could be some grander purpose that would still align with some of the realities I subscribe to about the world. The Romance of Reality is a great book.
I so want to read that.
Yeah, you need to. And there's one called Transhuman Potential, I know, is how it ends. I forget the start of the title. I read it probably a decade ago, but so there is potential there. But I guess my religion, you could say, is sort of centered around it really, for most practical purposes, it starts at the dawn of humanity, when we sort of started to evolve. It sort of starts with this dilemma, which pretty much every religion has some kind of dilemma. It has a problem with the natural state of things. And so mine is essentially that evolution didn't build us for us, right? Humans were not built for humans. We were built just to propagate our genes. We were built to reproduce. And for that reason, both our minds and society are not optimal. They're not really built for deep fulfillment and thriving. And so there's lots of problems that we see internally and outside, where it becomes empowering instead of just depressing, is the idea that you can have this transhuman potential to rebel against and change the natural state. And so to me, what makes it motivating and exciting is the idea that we're not locked into our current reality. Humanity is capable of modifying both our minds and our culture. These terms I use, psychotecture and sociotecture, to refer to. We have these unique capacities among the animal kingdom to actually understand our dilemma, understand the state we're in, and create changes that can accumulate and build, throughout history. And so we could create a world that, despite not being evolution's intention, really does serve humanity to the highest degree. I would love to be able to translate that into something that had even greater cosmic significance beyond humanity. I haven't currently found a way to do that without compromising my intellectual integrity, but I will let you know if I do.
Well, here, let me throw some ideas at you about that. One thing
Okay.
that I keep coming back to in my spiritual and religious, explorations, antics, is love, right? And that's actually can be a very difficult term to define, which is maybe part of the point there. But sort of a modus operandus of accommodation, acceptance, incorporation, integration, and sort of positive will toward, or something like that. A way of being which openly collaborates, as opposed to reducing and defining some things as desirable and some as undesirable, competing with reality, attacking, destroying, or moving away from things. So I could go on trying to paint that picture, but I think you sort of get the idea. And I've seen that as really, really core. And when I try to understand the idea of a consciousness below reality, or consciousness being at the core of reality, if there is such a thing, which arguably there is it has that sort of mode of operating, right? Because all of reality is inherently singular or whole or totally interconnected. All things in reality are held within and have a space within reality, and it's this incredibly integrative, adaptive, flexible world. Whether you're looking at the world of nature or just the way all of the infinite amount of objects and forces and interactive things, they're just it's this happening that's going on. There's no there's no isolated portions of reality. It's all together. And so and love is that sort of lack of separation or lack of isolation. And so one way that just one possible thing that could be like an ultimate universal purpose is like that I think about when I think about the stuff is spreading that mode of operating, right? Making it the case that conscious individuals live that out entirely, and wherever they are in the universe, that's lived out. That would, to me, be an ultimate purpose, because it's like there's the core consciousness, and maybe there isn't, but there's all of these points of consciousness in reality, and they have all these different ways that they can operate. But if all of the consciousness in the universe lives in a way which is accommodating and integrating, you're completely shifting the phenomenal landscape, the experience landscape of the universe as a whole, and building an entirely different future out of that. So sort of, to me, the becoming love, copying love, spreading love, like you might spread religion. Like I can see echoes of that as well in religions as they stand today, especially Christianity. And I can see that. I can see that being entirely non-magical in its thinking, not needing to make stuff up to be considered a universal purpose.
Yeah, well, certainly, there's a long sort of literary precedent for love sort of transcending all and being the ultimate purpose. And I think a big part of that is implicit in the philosophy I'm talking about too, of building a better world and better minds. I think love is incorporated in all that. I guess the question is, how does love really transcend humanity? Obviously, we can extend love to other non-human organisms, which, as far as we have evidence for, is all sort of concentrated on Earth. But what does a galaxy, 10 million miles, light years away from us, care about love or not? Does it really have greater cosmic significance than just humanity, or what we can add a caveat for any potential human-like other species that happen to be out there? But ultimately, love I see as something that more or less approximately evolved in humans and maybe other mammals, especially like dogs who have co-evolved with humans. I don't know how present that force is in, insects and lower animals, and I don't think it's really implicit in matter. And so I guess it still feels like our vision is limited to more or less to humanity, but maybe you see it connecting to matter in a broader, more cosmic sense. I just haven't connected the dots there.
Yeah, maybe I do. I think when you talk about, I don't see a galaxy, however many light years away, being influenced. Certainly not. I couldn't dispute that. I mean, materially, it will go on in exactly the same way, regardless of what's going on in this galaxy. But yeah, I guess it depends on how you map meaning cosmically, right? Like, how do you understand the existence of meaning and importance? I mean, to me, that galaxy far, far away, its existence only matters by any interpretation of the idea of matters, and in as much or has any meaning in as much as it's interacting with consciousness, right? And so that becomes the galactic significance of consciousness, is that it is the only channel by which anything in the universe can have meaning, can have a point, can have purpose, and then we get to decide what that is. And maybe that is leaning into your your sort of evolutionary rebellion thing could structure that in, that like we appeared as these things that have a capacity to value things, to create meaning out of things, and thus the whole universe, as far as meaning is concerned, it is only meaningful in as far as we engage with it. And so I'm very like there's a word, but like I'm something centric. I'm like experience centric in my whole model of the universe. Like I see what's going on with consciousness as what's happening in the universe, whereas just the way you responded to what I was saying before about love makes me sound like maybe you're like sort of more material centric and sort of just the way you map and conceive of reality. But this evolutionary rebellion narrative that you're painting could sort of map a resolution of those two opposing worldviews, where there was a dead, material sort of world that might as well not have existed as far as anyone cares, because that by definition that's true. And then then we came in with this capacity to create meaning, and now our purpose and the universe's purpose itself is something that we define, because the universe only has purpose in as much as, even if you're a tiny, spatially tiny part of it, you as a being can create that purpose.
Good point. No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not the number of. We shouldn't measure it, spatially in terms of the space-time universe, whatever. I think what you're describing is kind of like idealist, potentially panpsychist worldview of consciousness kind of being primary and maybe even all pervasive throughout the universe. And I'm on board with that part. It's not that I think every square mile of the universe has to have vested interest in this love thing. I think we can make consciousness sort of primary in the consideration. I guess I guess what it comes down to is that I feel like humans are the ones who care. Humans are the ones who actually value this thing called love and positively benefiting other organisms. Without human values, I don't see how it makes a difference one way or the other. I agree. And so I guess I don't know how we get out of this boundary that is, the human. The human scale of all this,
right?
And I guess,
right. Where's the thing that's beyond human? If
there's a God,
yeah.
If there's a God who transcends all of this, if there's a cosmic, cycle of rebirth or a karmic cycle of rebirth, like we see in Buddhism, if you've got some grand system for which our actions matter beyond humanity, maybe even beyond what we call conscious life, that sort of connects the dots there and makes it really matter on the highest possible scale.
So are you looking for that? So, is that something you're like, you're fine? You're like, building these stories, you're theorizing about a hypothetical religion. You're scheming away to start your cult and be a prophet and all of that. And you're wondering, where do I find the bit that's beyond humans, right? Where do I find that? Do you think that is something that maybe not is necessary, but has a huge impact on the capacity of this religion or movement to move?
I think so. I think it would be a huge win from a just, creative narrative constructing psychological purpose. I personally don't feel that much of a longing for something like that. I've got more than enough sort of purpose fueling me, just trying to benefit humanity where I can. But I do think it would give it more fuel, more power collectively. So I am casually looking, reading
Perusing.
occasional books that kind of yeah. So,
but maybe the narrative, because I like where you're coming from. I think there's something devaluing, and this is something I see as a core issue in religions in general. I think there's something devaluing about the human being by being attached to something has to be non-human, beyond us, better than us, before us, whatever, that validates the meaning in order for the meaning to matter at all. Like, right? Like, why can't human beings' meaning be enough on its own? And so maybe there's something you can put in the narrative. Maybe there's a battle between spiritual entities, or there's a story, or whatever it is you want to do, that instead of giving you that thing that's out there that validates human existence, because apparently us existing and creating meaning, because we already do that, isn't enough. Like, maybe you can tell a story which argues that, which says, actually, human meaning is objective meaning. It is total meaning, because it's the only meaning that exists in the universe. Like, that's how, we are. What about this whole phrase? It just keeps coming up to me. Like, we are the universe observing itself, right? Like that kind of. I think that could be said to agree with your framework of what consciousness is, and certainly of mine. That's that's enough to say that there's significance. We're the one part of reality that observes itself. We are the core of meaning. We're the center of meaning. We're the creators of meaning. How can you? Is it a psychological insecurity? Like, how can you tell human beings that existing and having meaning and creating that is enough for that to be legitimate? It doesn't have to be validated by something non-human.
Yeah. So, first, yeah, I absolutely agree with the sentiment that we're the universe experiencing itself. That kind of gets it. Like, that may actually be an Alan Watts quote, and that very much gets at the idea that, like, the universe isn't made up of a bunch of things. This sort of non-dual reality that, we sort of grow out of the universe. We experience it. We aren't just individual entities that have been placed on this planet, right?
Totally.
So that definitely resonates. Yeah. So I think in terms of our subjective values being enough, that's very much my view. I mean, I've always sort of felt like that's the solution to nihilism. It's not to find some kind of objective meaning out there outside of us. It is to learn that, the fact that we subjectively value things is all the reason we need to, want to live our lives in a certain way. And this is about as cosmic as it gets, is that we ultimately want to take the preponderance of our values, both our individual values and just collective human values, and get as close to that as we possibly can. And that's ultimately how I make sense of a lot of religion, is that these entities like God, Jesus, these are containers of the preponderance of our values. I don't think any one religious figure has fully encompassed all of our values, but I think if you take all these different ideals and sort of lump them together, you get a character that sort of represents what I think we should all be aiming for, and building minds and building a world that resembles this preponderance of our values as closely as possible.
Yeah. That's a great way to articulate it. What are the values that you think are part of the collective unconscious or whatever way you want to frame it, part of what humans value, that are not captured in Jesus or the Buddha, Gautama the Buddha, that are missing from those narratives.
I don't think they're particularly funny. I don't think anyone really pointed out what a hilarious comedian Jesus is.
Yeah.
And we value humor. We admire people who are funny. I don't think they're super creative. I mean, in a sense, these figures created these religions, but that's not really how the religions themselves understand them. They didn't invent anything. They sort of just they're the vessel through which we're learning about them. And so I think some of these ideas, Nietzsche would definitely have a field day in pointing out the values missing from Christianity, and that's really all about
reading in which book? I have it on my bookshelf right here. Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil. I recall reading in that some critiques of that type.
Love that book. But yeah, I mean, Nietzsche was all about sort of individual excellence and greatness and striving, as opposed to what he viewed as this kind of toxic solidarity with those who are less fortunate. I think Nietzsche is at least as deficient as Christianity in terms of how he's missing the compassion, love component. Really, I think we need the full spectrum instead of the different sort of reactionary thinkers who have just advocated for a few of them. I think if you really, want to look at this, Martin Seligman's list of 24 values or virtues, it's a pretty good start. It's not the final word on it, but just looking at what we see in every culture being valued pretty universally, I think is a good start. And then just trying our best to put some labels on it so we can wrap our heads around it.
Yeah. When I think about when I sink into my own being, what just lights me up, what are my values, what is the purpose that calls me from some unspeakable place, the parts that feel rebellious, I suppose, to the prescribed narratives of what are the good, correct virtues, within Christianity, for example, are specifically those two that you mentioned, among a couple others: creativity and humor. When I think of the ultimate expression of human values, a way of collectively living that just is that. It is what we hope for and aspire to. There's a lot of laughing going on, there's a lot of play going on, there's a lot of creation. There's a lot of creation going on, and that is something that does feel missing from Christianity.
You would probably find more of it in Taoism. It's a lot more centered around playfulness and humor and creation and that kind of thing. Cool. I guess that their ideal is more sort of the Tao itself, and they sort of got Lao Tzu, but he's more of a I guess legendary writer than the god that they worship or anything. So you do see these things reflected in religions, in their own right, but ideally you want to bring it all together.
Awesome. Okay, well, really great having you on, Ryan. I'm sure you'll be a repeating guest, and I hope you've enjoyed being a guest on the Mindform podcast, which was your idea to create, or maybe our mutually formed idea. I don't quite remember. My last question I always ask everyone, and I'm interested to see where this goes after the conversation that we've had, but what is one core idea or tool, probably going to be an idea in this case, that you would like to leave me or the audience with in relation to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I guess I'll build off of what we've been saying about this sort of North Star of your values and human values in general, and just say that I think this is sort of the ultimate guide, the ultimate North Star, the ultimate compass for navigating your own life. I think that it's a little bit too easy to kind of get swept up in the prescriptions that other people will give you. And the internet is full of prescriptions about how one type of person should be or another should be. And so I guess I always want to encourage people to get in touch with and just generally learn to rely more on your own compass, your own ideals, your own values, and ultimately what you admire in other people. I think that's really like kind of all you need is learning how to listen to that voice. And when you see people in your life that you admire, taking note and saying like, oh, that's something I want to incorporate. That needs to be built into the direction where I'm heading. But if you just use that and ignore everything else that other people tell you you're supposed to be doing, I think you'll end up far better off, and you'll end up in a place that's actually rewarding instead of just looks good on paper.
Yeah, and that's a big, if not the core idea in Become Who You Are, right? Like this, find what you value and live that out. And become who the fuck you are. That looks hilarious, that rewrite.
Right.
I'm wondering if the screw what other people tell you to care about part will also be weighed in more heavily in this rewritten version. But anyway,
well, we'll see if the rewritten version gets made. I'll probably make a poll and ask like the whole email list, like, do you think we should do this? Would you buy this book? Because there've been opinions on both sides so far.
Yes,
but
I've already
yes,
seen some of the
that'll
feedback
definitely
about that. Don't
but
ruin
that would
it.
definitely
It's
be
such a Well, anyway, really great having you on, Ryan. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking about that. It's been a nice opportunity for me to dive into these grandiose ideas, because they flit around in the back of my mind, but there are very, very few spaces where people are like, hey, if we like built a religion, how would we do that? So
I have thoroughly enjoyed it as well, Frank. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, Ryan. All right, well, that's us for the Mindform podcast this time, and see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io. I hope to see you inside.